Hello and welcome to NOV Live International. I'm Michael Gaines, host of the podcast NOV Today, and glad you are with us for this last segment today in our ongoing coverage on NOV Live International for this week. We're going to be talking about asset tracking and an innovative offering from NOV to address that challenge. And we're going to be talking with Lydia Brantley, the Director of Business Development, to talk about that further. But before we get to Lydia, we're going to go ahead and bring in Shelby Dumaine, our NOV social media manager, to talk through engagement and conversation in this segment. Hey, Shelby.
Hey, Michael. While we're doing the live today, you watching at home, whether you're on Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube, feel free to post any questions or comments you have for us down below in the comments. We're going to get through as many as we can today. I'm live in the comment section throughout the entire show, so we'll get to as many of your questions as possible. Feel free to comment them at any point throughout the show.
All right. Thanks, Shelby. So as we mentioned, we're talking about asset tracking and the idea of how to keep tabs on where assets are, especially when they're deployed in the field. It's an ongoing challenge for any asset owner. And NOV also recognized this challenge, and that's where we're going to go ahead and bring in Lydia Brantley, the Director of Business Director of Business Development here at NOV. So, hey, Lydia, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Michael, thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about asset tracking. So it sounds like a pretty straightforward concept, but obviously I know there are a lot of nuances in it. So as you kind of look at the world of asset management, how do you look at asset tracking specifically?
Yeah, I think it's important to simplify what can be loaded concepts. So when I think about asset tracking, it's asset owners and operators want to know that assets are ready to use so they can run them well and run them often. So when we say asset tracking, we mean giving you the ability with Max Track and Trace to determine where an asset is and where it's been so you can know that it's ready.
So when you look at this particular area of opportunity, one of the questions that could come to mind is why now? Why tackle this challenge now?
Yeah, operators, drilling contractors, oil field service companies, rental companies, kind of everyone in the oil field can all reduce risk and cost of their operations by eliminating the guesswork on how best to use and maintain their assets with a good asset tracking software. A colleague said that it's not a luxury anymore, it's a necessity, and I really believe that. So Max Track and Trace delivers much needed confidence, clarity, and cost savings to customers. It's going to allow them to always know they're selecting the right tool for an application, so they're not adding cost or risk to an operation. It's going to help them simplify workflows so that they can improve efficiency, and it's going to allow them to make informed, data-driven decisions on how best to use and maintain their assets so they can increase uptime and reduce maintenance spend.
So when you look at assets and those that you're wanting to identify, how do you do that from an electronic standpoint? I can already imagine, physically seeing one and maybe having a tally book or something similar. But when we're now shifting into an electronic space, how do we view that space?
Yeah, so when we talk about electronic identification, there's really kind of three main ways that you can look at it. So we're talking about QR codes and barcodes, but really importantly for our application, we're talking about proprietary proven radio frequency identification or RFID technology. So NOV is the only company that has a proven downhole RFID tag, which means that it can be used in downhole operations, be embedded in things like drill pipe, downhole drilling motors, for example. And that's our Track ID tag. We had the first commercial tag in 1997. It's obviously advanced in terms of both its quality as well as the number of operations that it's been in. We have about 81,000 assets, primarily drill pipe, drill collars, heavyweight drill pipe, so really drill string components that are using Track ID tags today. And a couple of quick facts about it. It's capable of, when I say being able to withstand extreme conditions, It's capable of withstanding temperatures up to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. It's north of 22,000 PSI in terms of pressure rating, and it has a service life of about 10 years. It can also sustain high vibrations when you talk about drilling in challenging environments, and being able to use the tag on components other than drill pipe. What's interesting actually is we did a survey of 125 people, and we looked at their use of RFID technology and other electronic identification technology. And what we found is that customers who used RFID found that it delivered a higher value than what they expected. So going into using a certain type of electronic identification, RFID kind of exceeded expectations. I want to say it was 60% of the time for those customers.
So when you're looking at that, because that's quite an interesting statistic in your findings. When you're looking at that, and especially talking about the value that that the end users are able to derive over, I suspect, conventional methods. What are there any additional areas that came to light that you found to be maybe either surprising or interesting that jumped out at you?
With the RFID technology specifically?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think one of the big things about RFID technology is it just allows you to identify assets easily and accurately. So if something comes in, we hear a lot of people talk about how serial numbers are stamped on these assets. And when they arrive to a location, whether it's a yard or a rig site, you kind of have to look and see closely, what does that number say? And people will talk about how a 6 becomes an 8 becomes a 9, a 3 becomes an 8. Quickly, you kind of are misreading serial numbers. And then as soon as you document that and add it into your records, you're kind of compounding the problem, because now you're going to have records that will reference assets that you don't even own. And what you can do with RFID technology, instead of having to read a stamped serial number, you're associating a unique identification number with your asset. So when you scan that RFID tag, it syncs up with information that you put in a database. And I think it's important to recognize that when you look at RFID, it's just an enabler for this technology, because all an RFID is being able to scan and then pull information that's associated. And that's, we're building kind of the database behind that so that you can always know what your asset is every time.
So your comment there just actually leads me into my next question, which is talking about asset records. Specifically, I'd like to hear your thoughts on why you feel having a complete asset record is important, and when you talk about a complete asset record, what are some of those components that come to mind that would comprise that record? Right.
So when you're talking about max track and trace, beyond being able to identify assets electronically so that you can do it easily and accurately, you can also create a complete comprehensive record that traces an asset from manufacture to retirement and has all the information that you might need. So if you think about a vehicle history report, like a Carfax, when you are buying a new car, you want to know all the things that have happened to it in the past. You want to know if it's been in any accidents, how it's been maintained, where it's been used, so that you can inform your purchase decision. There are some similarities in the oil field where we have people who want to resell or repurpose assets once they no longer serve their intended use. So an example might be if assets get downgraded and they need to move from one type of application to another, or if now they're more suitable for another customer. That would be one example of kind of the resell and repurpose opportunity. But when you talk about having complete records, it's really a lot more than that. It's about knowing the assets that you're about to put into an operation. So we have some customers, for example, that only want assets that have been used less than 300 hours downhole. So we can capture that information and have that readily available, both in a web register or directly at the asset if you scan it with an RFID reader. The way that you can capture some of this really detailed information, like usage, downhole hours, is through our auto tally sensors and system. And I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. But the other types of items that you're looking at for complete records, it's really things like, did it get an inspection? How was it inspected? Did it pass inspection? Did it move from one location to the other? Who currently possesses that asset? So being able to answer those questions, I think, is really important, so that people can have the confidence that they're using the right tools all the time, and using the right tools. And I would say also selecting the right tools for maintenance. So we have had some customers who have said, for example, that they've sent the wrong tool to get inspected or repaired. And that's introducing unnecessary costs into their system.
So when you look at the overall picture and specifically pulling in feedback and insight that you've gained from end users, customers, and those in the field, I'm sure there's a laundry list of challenges that came up when they talked about getting accurate information on getting a complete asset. Can you just maybe touch on some high level points that came to light? What are those challenges in really being able to get a solid, complete picture of assets?
Sure. A big thing is that assets move. They cross geographic boundaries and they cross organizational boundaries. So it's typically not just one person who's always going to be in possession of an asset. You're going to use it. You're going to send it off to inspection. You're going to send it off to repair. It might enter into inventory, and then it's going to come back to location for use. With each of those moves, an asset is going to accumulate information, and that's all information that we can record within MaxTrack and Trace. So when you look at the application, it's what you have on the screen right now. When you scan an asset, you'll see a condensed version of this that's kind of fit for a mobile application. But if you look up an asset in our web register, these are some of the details you'll see. So you'll know the serial number, the manufacturer, the asset type. You'll know all the specifications. You'll know the recent inspection and maintenance data. You'll know who has it and when it's expected back. I think a really important thing too that we're able to do within our application is that we can allow authorized users from other organizations to add information to your asset. So when we talk about things moving from one location to the next, frequently that might be what happens is I send it off for inspection, and then an inspection record comes back with it, a paper record. So I have a digital system, but now I have this paper record, and what do I do with it? Well, within MaxTrack and Trace, you can upload that paper record if you want to, just to make it digitally. You can also integrate with NOV's inspection system that our Tuboscope system uses for drill string components, or we could integrate with other systems, likely NOV owned, to capture and perform inspections and maintenance. But you can also allow users to go in and log basic details about what's occurred to an asset. So if I have a partner that I use frequently, like a shore base where I send assets to, I can give those people access to be able to scan my assets, to be able to move my assets, to be able to upload basic information about inspection, maintenance, general status. That way, when I'm in my office and not in possession of my assets, I can access that information in real time and know that I have the complete view of what's going on.
So it sounds like not only does the system provide the ability to capture that information, but in terms of flexibility of who and how the system can be interacted with, that's one of the, it sounds like a foundational element that's built into the overall approach and philosophy.
Yeah, definitely. And we are trying to really look at how MaxTrack and Trace can match the way you work. And that's all about building a flexible system. Right. So it's making a system that, like I said, it's tag agnostic. It can use RFID tags if you want to install RFID tags in your assets. But if you don't, we have the ability to create and generate unique QR and barcodes from the application that you can apply to your assets.
Hmm.
We also have customizable asset templates. So if you want 2 different types of assets in your system, for example, those different types of assets are likely going to have different pieces of information that you want to know about them. So like last week, for example, I was in a demo with someone and I showed them all this information that we had defined for drill string components, which is a kind of a primary asset that we're looking at within Max Track and Trace, just because it's where we have the largest installed base of Track ID RFID tags. And when we were looking at the application, the customer made a comment that they wanted to know internal plastic coating condition, which was not an attribute that we had specified. Well, in that conversation, I opened up the application, customized an attribute, and applied it to all those attributes so he could start tracing that information.
Mm. Yeah, and that sounds really interesting. And I have another actually question and follow up for you. But before I do, I'm going to pull Shelby Domain in, our social media manager, to give us some of the feedback and questions that we're getting on in the comment section. So Shelby, what do we have?
Hi. So Brian on LinkedIn, he was wondering, is the technology available to track this information going through the rotary table on a drilling rig to generate the drill string, BHA, or pipe tally?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah.
So Max Track and Trace fundamentally does not have that, but we have enhancements to the application that we can use with other NOV software. So that would be NOV's auto tally system, where we place sensors in the rotary table to read tagged components as they go downhole. And the information that is captured in Alice is the sequence of components that went downhole. It's also the usage hours, the rotation hours, and the number of rotations where that asset was, the number of rotations for that asset. If you're using other NOV technology and have the capability to see kind of well data, then you can get more insight and know how many rotating hours did you have on the curve section? How many hours did you spend in the vertical? How many hours did you spend in the lateral? And when you use that information, you can make informed data-driven insights into how you maintain your assets, because you can reshuffle them. You can use something that used to be in the vertical, in the curve. You can do maintenance for things that need maintenance versus doing it arbitrarily and defining it based on usage. Auto tally can also, Shelby, like you referenced, it can just, a basic benefit is being able to tally automatically and eliminate the need for manual measurement on location. So auto tally is a great system. It integrates with Max Track and Trace, and we can enable the use of that application.
So when you talk about the Max Track and Trace application, I'm wondering if you can maybe help those that are watching and maybe myself as well, sort of draw a mental picture. So how do you use this application? What does it look like in terms of how they would interface or interact?
Sure. So if you think about the application, it's really set up in 2 ways. So we have a web application where you can go in and you can view your inventory. You can find any assets that you want. You can view the details like we saw in that screenshot earlier. You can also manage the check-in and check-out process of those assets. So you might, as an asset manager, have a customer call you and ask for 300 assets to be sent to their location for an upcoming job. With Max Track and Trace, you can go through your inventory, select the right assets that satisfy those requirements, and set them aside for that request. You can also use the mobile application to scan and identify the assets before they go out for delivery. When we think about the mobile application, it's kind of, if you think about just a general rig yard or even an inspection yard, if assets arrive to a location, I want to be scanning them. I want to check them in. I want to update their location. I also am likely going to move them around my location, and I'm going to have to keep track of where exactly they are. So we have customers who've told us, they'll talk to their yards and they get frustrated when someone isn't able to tell them where exactly in the yard their assets are. With Max Track and Trace, you can do that because you're scanning and moving the assets, performing these basic functions. So that's some of what it looks like in terms of kind of web and mobile interface. And I think importantly on the mobile too, you can work offline and then sync up whenever you're next connected to internet. But Michael, were you looking for something kind of specifically of describing an application in terms of how someone might use it, or real life situation, for example?
No, you hit on the nail on the head for me in terms of my line of questioning. I'm certainly interested to know a specific application, but before I do get to that, I do want to get to Shelby again.
Sure.
I think she had a comment or question that we had online.
Yeah, so this was a comment from Noah on LinkedIn, and I actually kind of want to turn it into a question that I'd like to ask you.
Sure.
Is this technology being deployed offshore?
That's a great question. So this technology, I should have prefaced, is new to the market. So we have a beta version available that we're field testing at NOV's Research Development and Technology Center, so our test rig in Navasota, Texas. And we're working to pilot with a few external customers. But we would be, the technology is really kind of environment agnostic as well. So you could use it offshore or you could use it onshore when it's ready to go. We are eager to hear from people and potential interested parties onto how they can test and pilot the application so that we can get their feedback and ensure that we're helping people as well as we can.
Yeah, that's really good, and I know that we've talked in a couple other segments here at NOV Live International about the RDTC, or Research and Development Technology Center. So definitely a place that we'd be more than happy to have. I know you've been out there, Lydia, and I'm sure that others would like to see this technology as well. So wanted to maybe wrap around. So to your point, Lydia, when people come out to the RDTC in this case, if they wanted to see this technology, and they were kind of walking up to an asset to maybe utilize in a kind of an example function, what is the process like? Is it rather cumbersome, or does it seem intuitive in terms of how the process flow works?
Great word. So we actually designed our application with 3 words in mind: intuitive, elegant, and insightful. So we wanted something that would blend in with your existing workflows. And when you think about walking up to a tool and being able to access the information, what you have is an RFID, if you're talking about an RFID tagged asset, you have an RFID reader that syncs via Bluetooth to a mobile application. And that can be your phone, a tablet, whatever you would like. But you read that asset with the scanner, and information would come up that tells you what that asset is, who owns it, where it is, where it's been, when it was last inspected, and when it was last maintained, so that you can make decisions on that asset and take actions. Like I mentioned earlier, you can check assets in and out, you can update their location, you can move them as a group, and the like.
Right. Yeah. And I know we showed some pictures just a moment ago of the RDTC where, like you said, we can see the Max Track and Trace system in action.
And we can also, we are ready to work with customers on their locations as well, which I think is really important, to be able to fit into their workflows and see how it can work. So talking with a few customers, you hear about applications that they mentioned, and a perfect one is finding a suitable replacement for an asset. So being on a rig site and recognizing that each rig, for certain expensive tools, they might only have one. And so somewhere else in that basin, there's one rig that has a backup tool. Well, what happens if your tool fails? You have to call the shop manager for that location and see if they have it in the shop, or you have to call around to all the other rigs to see if that asset's on their location. What our customer mentioned to us was that in the middle of the night, they didn't want to wake the shop manager, have him drive in his truck to the shop and see if a tool was available. So they went to every rig's Excel records and perused to see which one had the backup tool, and then called them to see if they could get it. Typically, the records were out of date, and a response that they might get was, I know the record says we have it, but we actually shipped it out yesterday. So with Max Track and Trace, you eliminate that workflow. You can go directly into the application. You can find on your mobile device or the web, but I think importantly in this instance, on the mobile device, you can search your inventory and find similar assets, and you can request them for your location.
Wow. Well, I know that in preparation for today, I've read about Max Track and Trace. I've talked to people about it personally, and maybe even selfishly. I'd love to come out to the RDTC to see it myself, but I'm sure others would love the opportunity as well. So for those that are interested in learning more about Max Track and Trace, the asset register solution that Lydia has been talking about today, utilizing RFID technology, you can send an email to Lydia, and actually we'll put her email address up. It's lydia.brantley@nov.com, and I'm sure she and her team would be more than happy to talk to you about Max Track and Trace and how this can help you with your asset management and tracking needs. So been speaking with Lydia Brantley, the Director of Business Development here at NOV. So Lydia, thank you so much for the time and insight today.
Thanks, Michael, and thanks everyone for the great questions.
All right. Well, that's going to do it today for our NOV Live International segment. Join us tomorrow on Wednesday, May 6th, starting at 5 a.m. U.S. Central Time or 11 a.m. UTC as we kick it off talking about FracMax and the quick latch technology. We'll then follow that up with David Reed, NOV's Chief Technology and Marketing Officer. We'll then talk about rotary steerable technology with Kirby Wetterer, and then we'll round out the day talking to Russ Moncrief on Grant Prideco Delta connection. So from all of us here at NOV, thanks so much for tuning in today, and we look forward to talking to you tomorrow as we kick it off again here on our week of coverage talking tech across the industry here on NOV Live International. From all of us here at NOV, thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you later.